He tried to close my bank account. Not ask for money, not borrow, not even steal quietly. He walked into the branch, said I was incapacitated, and handed over a forged power of attorney with my dead husband's name on it. I'm 78. I still drive, cook, walk without a cane. I still remember my first locker combination in high school. But according to my son, I'm not fit to handle my own finances. The bank clerk's hands were shaking slightly as he told me. His name was Michael. Young, polite, maybe 30. Mrs. Groves, we didn't process anything. We were concerned about the paperwork. That's why I asked you to come in today. He didn't say fraud, but it hung in the air, sharp and obvious. I sat in that stiff leather chair across from his desk and stared at the form. All the fields were filled. My name, my address, my date of birth, the forged signature, a doctor's letter attached, also fake, saying I was suffering from early-stage dementia. I could see the notary stamp smudged at the bottom, and his name at the end. Thomas Groves. My son. I didn't say a word for a long time. Michael kept glancing at me like he expected a breakdown, a cry, or maybe an excuse. But I just sat there, remembering the boy with skinned knees who once cried because I threw away his broken Lego piece. He couldn't bear to let go of anything, not even things he'd ruined. I looked at Michael. Is there anything I need to sign? He blinked. Ma'am? To cancel all access, to revoke any prior authorizations, to block him from everything he might think he has a right to. Michael opened a drawer slowly, pulled out a folder, and passed it across the table. These forms will do that, and we'll flag your account permanently. I took the pen and signed each line with a hand steadier than I expected. When I finished, I leaned back and looked out the window. Traffic was moving like always, slow and lazy. A bus full of school kids passed. I wondered if any of their mothers had ever been betrayed by their sons. You don't have to go through this alone, Mrs. Groves, Michael said carefully. I smiled at him, not kindly, not bitterly, just evenly. I'm not alone. I have a granddaughter who brings me flowers on Tuesdays. And now I have your forms. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. I stood up, straightened my coat, and walked out of the branch without looking back. The sun was warm, too warm for October. I got in my car and sat for a minute before turning the key. The envelope was still in my purse, the one with the documents Thomas had tried to file. I pulled it out and held it in my lap. Then I started the car, drove straight home, and opened the locked drawer where I kept every canceled check I'd ever written him. The list was long. The first check I ever wrote to Thomas was for $12. He was 17, and his football team needed matching socks. He'd asked his father first, quiet, polite. And when Ray said no, Thomas came to me with those big brown eyes and the speech about team spirit and looking the part. I gave it to him in cash, but I wrote the check to remind myself where it started. The second was for college, then rent, then his wedding, then a new water heater, then therapy, then the divorce. It went on and on, a pattern so slow and steady it took me decades to see the slope I'd been sliding down. That morning, after the bank, I spread all the papers on the dining table. I hadn't touched the good china in years, but now the table was covered edge to edge with paperwork. 43 canceled checks, 8 wire transfers, 4 power of attorney forms he had me sign just in case, and 2 life insurance policies with his name listed as sole beneficiary. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt tired. I made myself tea, sat down, and opened a notepad. The same kind I used when Ray and I ran our hardware store. I wrote down everything Thomas had received from me in the last 20 years, item by item, line by line. The total made my stomach twist. $412,680, not including groceries, not including the birthday trips or the gas cards or the medical bills for his daughter when he couldn't get her on his plan, not including love. At around noon, the phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, letting it buzz. 5 rings. Voicemail. Then the message came in. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Wanted to let you know I dropped off some paperwork at the bank last week, just in case something happens. They might call you. No big deal, just routine. Call me when you can." Routine. That's what he called. Trying to take my money, my name, my rights. Routine. I took a slow breath, then dialed a different number, one I hadn't used in nearly 5 years. My lawyer, Deborah Langston. The last time we'd spoken was after Ray passed. Deborah speaking. "It's Edith Groves," I said. "I need to change my will." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Come in this afternoon. I'll clear the schedule." I dressed carefully. Nothing too formal. Just something that said I knew what I was doing. My navy wool skirt. The pearl earrings Ray gave me on our 25th anniversary. The ones Thomas once told me looked a little out of place on someone without a retirement plan. At the office, Deborah listened without interrupting. She took notes. She raised one eyebrow when I told her about the forged papers. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." She nodded. "But you want to revoke all previous power of attorney and remove him from the will. And," I added, "I want to set up a trust for my granddaughter Emma." Deborah's pen paused over the page. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "She's the only one who still calls me because she wants to, not because she needs something." We spent the next hour going over documents. I signed each one without hesitation. When it was done, I walked outside, stood on the curb, and looked up at the sky. The air felt different, lighter, like something had shifted. Then I took out my phone, scrolled down to Thomas's name, and blocked it. He could have had everything. Not my money, but my trust. Now he had neither. The silence after blocking your child's number isn't peace. It's something else, a kind of hum beneath the floorboards. You hear it when the fridge clicks off, when the faucet stops dripping, when the whole house exhales and realizes it's not waiting for anyone to come through the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, from remembering. I lay in bed with the lamp on, staring at the same crack in the ceiling that Ray always swore he'd fix. Thomas was my only child. There was a time I couldn't say that without a swell of pride. I carried him through a winter so bitter our breath froze on the windows inside the house. Gave birth with no epidural because the hospital was full. Worked the register with stitches still fresh just to keep the store running. And he turned out clever. Charming. One of those boys who could sell sand to a drowning man. I remember the first time he lied to me. Small. Stupid. Something about a field trip. I believed him because I wanted to. That was the start of everything. He learned that my belief was easier to borrow than money. The next morning, I brewed coffee and called the bank. Not the branch. The central office. I asked to speak to the fraud department. They put me through to a man named Harris, calm, professional, voice like he'd handled messes far bigger than mine. "I'd like to report attempted financial fraud," I said. "The person's name is Thomas Groves, my son." I could hear the way he took a breath after that. Subtle, but there. "Mrs. Groves," he said carefully, "has a police report been filed?" "Not yet," I said. "I'm handling this privately. For now." "I understand. We can add a fraud alert on your profile, and I recommend contacting the credit bureaus as well. Would you like help with that?" "Yes," I said. "And I'd also like to create a restriction. No changes to any of my accounts without me present. In person, with ID. And I mean photo ID, not a note from someone claiming I forgot my own name." Harris agreed. He was kind, no small talk, no pity. After that, I did call the police. Not to file a report, not yet, but to document the forgery. A woman named Officer Briggs took down the details. She was blunt, efficient. At one point, she asked, "Do you feel unsafe, ma'am?" "No," I said. "I just feel done." It was noon by the time I got off the phone. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the little notepad with the running total of money Thomas had taken over the years. I flipped the page. At the top, I wrote, "Things I still have. A house with no mortgage. A car that runs. A garden full of tomatoes. One granddaughter who still calls me grandma and means it. My name, my account. My story." I stared at that last one the longest. My story, not his. Thomas always told the story of the helpless mother who wouldn't have made it through Ray's death without his guidance. He made himself the hero in rooms I wasn't in. I used to let it slide. What difference did it make? But now it mattered. Because when someone tries to erase you, you better make damn sure they don't get to write the ending. I hadn't realized how long I'd been silent until Emma knocked on the door that evening. She always texted first, always called me Grandma with that steady voice of hers. Never sweetened, never fake. But this time, she just showed up. I heard her car pull in, that old hatchback with the muffler problem, and by the time I opened the door, she was already halfway up the porch steps with a grocery bag in her arms. "I brought soup," she said, holding it out like a peace offering. I stepped aside and let her in. The house still smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink from the forms I'd signed. Emma didn't say anything until we were in the kitchen. She set the bag down, took off her jacket, and looked at me with those same eyes I once wiped tears from when she skinned her knees at 4 years old. "Dad's freaking out," she said. I didn't flinch. I just poured tea. "He called me 5 times today. Said you're confused, that you're overreacting, that you," she paused, "might be having a late onset episode, whatever that means." I stirred honey into my tea and set the spoon down carefully. "He said that?" She nodded, biting her lip. "He told Aunt Lorna you tried to close your own account and forgot halfway through, that the bank manager had to walk you out." "Did he now?" Emma leaned forward. "Is any of that true?" I met her eyes. "No." She let out a slow breath and sat back. "Good. Because it didn't sound like you. And I told him that. I said, if Grandma forgot anything, it's because she's tired of remembering for everyone else." I smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. "I'm not losing my mind," I said, more to myself than to her. But I think I finally stopped losing my patience. Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Hers was warm, calloused from working at the bookstore. She wasn't the kind of girl who wore acrylic nails or posted selfies. She wore thrifted jackets and remembered birthdays without needing Facebook reminders. "Did he really try to close your account?" "He forged Ray's name," I said. "Filed a letter saying I had dementia. Tried to take everything. Emma looked stricken. But why? You've always helped him. I pulled the notepad from the counter and turned it to the second page. 412U 680. Her eyes widened. Grandma, that's your whole life. I nodded. And still not enough. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry leaves on the sidewalk. The kind of autumn day that makes you aware of time. Not in a sad way, just honestly. Like nature doesn't lie. Finally, Emma said, "What are you going to do?" "I already did it," I replied. "He's blocked from my accounts. The bank's flagged his name. The lawyers redrafted the will." "And me?" "You," I said, squeezing her hand. "Have a trust now. Not a fortune, but enough. For school, for rent, for whatever gives you freedom." Her mouth dropped open. "Grandma, I didn't come here for—" "I know," I cut in gently. "That's why it's yours." She covered her face with her hands. I could see her shoulders shaking. Not from greed, not from guilt, but from some soft, painful recognition that someone had seen her, chosen her, believed in her. "You've always had a key to this house," I said. "Now you have something more." Emma lowered her hands and looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "He's going to be furious." "I hope he is," I said calmly. "Maybe fury will feel different enough from entitlement to wake him up." And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like pride rise up in me. Not for the things I'd given, but for the thing I'd finally taken back. My voice. The letter came 2 days later. Thick envelope, my name typed neatly on the front. No return address. I knew the handwriting on the enclosed note before I even opened it. Thomas never learned cursive properly. His R's always looked like incomplete B's. Inside, a 3-page letter, folded with the kind of precision that tries to pass for sincerity. I sat down at the kitchen table, unfolded it carefully, and began to read. "Dear Mom, I'm sorry things have gotten to this point. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. I never meant to hurt you. The paperwork at the bank was just a precaution. You're getting older, and I was trying to make sure things were in order in case of emergency. I didn't forge anything. I just filled out what the clerk told me. Maybe someone else made a mistake." The audacity in every sentence hit like a cold slap. A precaution? Using my dead husband's name was a precaution? Lying to the bank about my mental health was an act of love? I kept reading. I realize now that maybe I should have communicated more clearly. I've been under a lot of pressure lately. Work is unstable, and Emma's tuition is a burden. I thought if I could just manage things better, we'd all be better off. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I was trying to protect you. Please call me. I'm worried about you. Worried. About me. The last line was the worst of all. I hope you can forgive me. Let's sit down and talk like a family. I folded the letter slowly, then tore it in half, then again, and again, until the pieces were too small to carry meaning. I didn't need a family meeting. I needed the truth. That same day, the bank confirmed the last step of the trust transfer. Deborah called to say the paperwork was finalized, everything locked in. Emma would be notified officially within the week. "You did well," she said, "and you did it clean." I thanked her, then hung up and stared at the window for a long while. The maple in my yard had finally gone red. October always made things honest, stripped them down to what they were underneath. That evening, Emma came by again. She didn't knock this time, just called from the car and said, "I'm outside, got groceries." She didn't bring up the trust. She didn't say a word about the money. We just made grilled cheese, ate in the kitchen with the window open, and listened to the leaves scratching across the sidewalk. Halfway through the meal, she said, "Dad's trying to guilt trip me." I nodded. I figured. He says I'm choosing sides. Are you? She looked at me, clear, unflinching. No, I'm choosing truth. There's a difference. I reached over and touched her wrist. Good. Emma was quiet for a while, then said, "He's going to hate me." No, I said. He's going to blame you. That's different. Hatred takes effort. He's never worked that hard for anyone. She laughed, sharp but not bitter. You're colder than I remember. No, I said, just finally warm enough for myself. That night, after she left, I sat in the living room and pulled out the photo album I hadn't opened in years. There we were, Ray, Thomas, me, in a different time. A time when love didn't have ledgers, when hugs weren't debts. I kept the album open beside me as I fell asleep in the chair. I wanted to remember where we started, so I'd never forget how far I'd come. The first call came at 7:42 the next morning. I recognized the number, not Thomas, but his wife, Evelyn. We hadn't spoken in over a year. The last time was Easter, when she'd dropped off a store-bought pie with a note saying, "We're swamped, love you." She'd barely made it up the steps. Her perfume lingered longer than she did. This time, she didn't wait for voicemail. "Edith, hi," she said, voice clipped, brisk. "I think we need to talk." I was still in my robe, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. "About what?" She sighed, the theatrical kind. "I don't want to be in the middle of whatever's happening between you and Thomas, but you're making things very difficult." "I haven't made a single phone call," I said. "He's the one scrambling." She ignored that. "Emma told us about the trust. Do you think it's fair to pit her against her father like this? She's a child." "She's 24, I said evenly. "A child emotionally. She's not ready to carry that kind of financial responsibility, and it sends the wrong message." "What message would you prefer?" I asked. "That theft is a family value?" There was a pause. "I know you're upset," Evelyn said, voice cooling. "But this could still be fixed, quietly. No need to involve lawyers. If you'd just sit down with Thomas—" "I did," I cut in. "In my mind. I sat down with every version of him I've ever known. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The teenager who lied about failing chemistry. The man who asked me for money under the table because his pride couldn't take a real job. And I decided that version's run its course. You always had a flair for the dramatic." "No," I said. "I just finally stopped being afraid of silence." She tried once more. "He's your son." "I know exactly what he is." I ended the call and set the phone down carefully on the table, like it might burn a hole through the wood if I wasn't gentle. 10 minutes later, Thomas called again. Then once more. I didn't answer. At 11, I drove to the community center, not to join anything, just to sit. They'd renovated it a few years ago, added tall windows and polished floors. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I sat on a bench outside the library room and watched 2 old women play cards across the hallway. One of them was wearing a sweatshirt that said, "Unbothered since '53. I smiled without meaning to. After a while, a woman I didn't recognize sat beside me. Thin frame, elegant coat, hands folded neatly in her lap. "You here for the estate workshop?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just visiting ghosts." She nodded slowly. "Me too." We didn't say much after that, but it felt good. Not being needed, not being begged or guilted. just existing, without agenda. On the way home, I stopped by the post office. My box was mostly empty. A coupon flyer, a retirement investment ad, and one pale blue envelope with no return address. Inside was a card. No message. Just a photo of a little boy holding a Lego spaceship, a Polaroid, from 1988. On the back, in my handwriting, Tommy's first big build. Wouldn't let anyone touch it. The card had been folded, flattened, refolded. It had lines like an old letter that someone couldn't quite throw away. I drove home with it on the passenger seat, glancing over at it like it might explain something. But it didn't. He'd built something once, with pieces he was proud of, and now, all these years later, he was trying to take apart what wasn't his. But I wasn't letting him, not anymore. Sunday came quiet. The kind of quiet that used to mean something in this town. Church bells, slow coffee, neighbors in their gardens. Now it just meant no calls from spam numbers and one less excuse to ignore the silence. I took my tea out to the porch. The air had that cold edge October carries when it wants to remind you what's coming. I wrapped the shawl tighter around my shoulders and watched the world wake up slowly. A jogger, a squirrel, the neighbor boy dragging his trash bin with one wheel missing, and then a car I recognized. Thomas's, not the rusted Corolla he used to drive. No, this was the newer model, sleek, gray, with the payment plan I probably funded. He didn't park. He idled. Then he got out, smoothed his jacket, walked up the steps with that slow, practiced calm he used in meetings, the one that said, "I've already decided how this conversation ends." I didn't move. He stopped 2 feet from me, hands in his coat pockets. "Mom, Thomas, you won't return my calls." "No." He nodded, like I'd confirmed something. "I wanted to talk, in person." I took a sip of my tea. "I know things got misunderstood," he said. "You forged a letter." His jaw tightened. "That's not how I would put it." I raised my eyebrows. "I thought we had an understanding," he went on, "that I'd help manage your affairs. You're not exactly getting younger." I looked at him, standing there like a man who thought age was an argument. "Do you think I've made it 78 years just to forget who I am?" "Mom, come on, don't make this harder than it is." "No," I said calmly. "You already made it hard. I'm just done pretending it's not." He shifted. The breeze tugged at his coat hem. "So that's it? You cut me off? After everything I've done?" I stared at him for a long second. "What exactly have you done, Thomas? Name one thing you've done for me that wasn't transactional." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Emma's the one who calls, who visits, who asks how I'm doing without asking for anything in return. She's just a kid. She's twice the man you ever were." That landed. I saw it. Not as a slap, not even as cruelty, but as truth. The kind that stings because it fits. "I needed help," he said finally. "I didn't know how else to ask." "You didn't ask. You stole." We stood there a moment longer, both of us wrapped in our own stubborn quiet. Then he said, "People are going to talk. Let them. She'll regret it, you know," he added. "Emma, when the money ruins her." I stood up. "You want me to believe she'll fail because you would have." Thomas blinked. "I gave you more than money," I said. "I gave you time, shelter, forgiveness. You turned all of it into a leverage tool. And you lost." He looked down at the floorboards. "So you're really going to throw your own son away?" "No," I said. "You did that. I'm just refusing to pick you back up." And with that, I turned and went inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't lock it for drama. I just closed it. Slowly, deliberately. Behind me, the house sighed, like it had waited a long time for someone to finally do that. I didn't hear from him for a week. No calls, no letters, not even a guilt-ridden knock at the door. The silence didn't feel like peace. Not yet. It felt like the eye of something, like calm before a choice. But then came the email. The subject line was short. Request for mediation. The sender, Evelyn Groves. She'd written it like a business letter. Formal, punctuated, capitalized where emotions used to live. Dear Edith, Thomas and I believe it would be in everyone's best interest to have a mediated discussion. There are several misunderstandings and legal complications that should be resolved before this situation becomes unnecessarily public or escalates further. We are willing to meet at a neutral location. If you agree, please respond with availability. We hope to handle this with maturity and respect. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words, but because they no longer deserved mine. I printed the email, folded it in half, and placed it under the ceramic paperweight Ray gave me the year he forgot our anniversary. A small apology shaped like a lighthouse. It had once felt romantic. Now it felt more like a warning. 2 days later, a letter arrived from their lawyer. I opened it with steady hands, sitting at the dining room table with my tea and the low hum of the radio behind me. The name on the letterhead was unfamiliar, but the tone was all too known, polite, pressure-laced, cloaked in suggestion but sharpened by money. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Groves, believe that recent changes made to estate planning documents were done under emotional duress and without sufficient legal guidance. We are requesting a review of the decisions involving financial transfers and will allocations, especially as they relate to the trust now in Ms. Emma Groves's name. I read the entire letter, then again, and I smiled. Because desperation has a scent, and they were wearing it like cologne. I called Deborah the next morning, told her what came. She asked me to read it out loud. I did. She chuckled halfway through. You want me to respond? No, I said. I want you to wait. Let's give them more rope. You sure? I'm 78. I've lived through war, loss, childbirth, a 2-income business collapse, and a husband who died on a Tuesday, but left love behind like it was interest on a loan. I've survived worse than a letterhead. Deborah laughed. You know, you're kind of terrifying now. I should have been sooner. Later that day, I called Emma. She answered on the second ring. Grandma, everything okay? I got a letter, I said. There was a pause. From them? I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me. Yes, they want mediation. Evelyn wrote first, then their lawyer. Emma didn't say anything for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I can give it back, Grandma. The trust. If it's going to... No. But if they... No, I said again. You're not giving back what wasn't stolen. You didn't ask for this. I gave it to you. That matters. I don't want to make things worse. You're not, I said. You're what made things better. She let out a breath. One I could hear shake a little. They'll probably come after you next, I added. Guilt, threats, family dinners with silence and heavy eyes. Just know I trust you. I won't fold, she said. I promise. I know. That night, I sat in the living room with the lamp low and the letter beside me. I ran my fingers over the embossed name of their lawyer, a man who probably thought a 78-year-old woman with no formal education would tremble at a cease and desist. He didn't know I used to fix commercial plumbing valves with my bare hands, that I could calculate compound interest faster than his interns, that I once saved our store from foreclosure by selling 50 lawnmowers in a weekend because I promised every customer a home-baked pie. I don't scare easy. Let them send letters. Let them call it war. I've been in battles where the enemy wore grief, not Gucci. This is a reckoning. The next escalation didn't come by mail. It came by knock, a slow, deliberate rhythm, not neighborly, not nervous. The kind of knock meant to announce control. I didn't move at first. I was in the back room, going through the winter linens. But the knocking continued. Measured. Patient. By the time I opened the front door, Evelyn was standing on my porch in a camel-colored coat, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked like a mask. She had a clipboard in her arms. Not a purse, not a bag, not even gloves, though the morning was cold enough to sting. "Good morning, Edith," she said, as if this was normal. "It's not," I said, and didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. Just stepped forward, as if my doorway was hers. I stood in the threshold blocking the entrance. She adjusted the clipboard. "I thought we could speak face to face. You haven't responded to any of our communications." "That's intentional." She smiled, polite, sharp. "I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm uninterested." She glanced past me into the house, as if looking for signs of senility. A mess, a forgotten stove, something she could use. "You've made decisions that affect our entire family." "No," I said. "I made decisions that affect my money. You're not entitled to either." Evelyn shifted her stance. I saw the tightness in her jaw then, the cracks behind the politeness. "You're making this difficult for Emma. She's managing just fine. She's being manipulated. You've always had a strange influence over her." I almost laughed. "You're mistaking love for influence. Easy to do when you've never felt either." That did it. Her eyes hardened. She held out the clipboard. "I'm here to offer one final proposal. If you dissolve the trust and return the funds to a central family account, we'll drop all legal inquiries and handle everything quietly. No damage to reputations, no unnecessary attention." I didn't take the clipboard. "You think I'm afraid of attention?" I asked. "I think you're not thinking clearly. This hurts everyone. This protects everyone. From him." She took a breath. "He's your son." I nodded. "And you're his mirror." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she dropped the polite act entirely. "You're burning the bridge," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "You two set it on fire years ago. I just stopped pretending it was a path." She turned sharply and walked down the steps, heels clicking like accusations. The clipboard stayed in her hands, unsigned. I stood in the doorway, watching her go, the wind tugging at her coat. Just before she reached the car, she turned back. "You've taught Emma to be cruel." I smiled. "No, I've taught her not to inherit silence." And then I closed the door. This time I did lock it, not out of fear, but finality. Later that evening, I found a voicemail from Emma. "Grandma, did she come by? I heard from Dad. He said something about a last olive branch. I'm worried. You okay?" I called her back right away. Her voice was tight when she answered. "I'm fine," I said gently. And she brought a clipboard, not an olive branch. "Did you sign anything?" "I don't sign lies." She was quiet. Then, "I told them I wouldn't meet them without you. They said you were unstable. That you'd manipulated the bank, the lawyer, me. I let that sit for a second. And do you believe them? No, she said. But it still stung. Hearing it. From him. I know. We were both silent for a while, sitting in different houses with the same ache. The ache of realizing that family can disappoint you deeper than any stranger. Finally, she said, I'm not giving it back. The trust. I don't care what they threaten. I know, I whispered. And I did. I believed her. Because Emma, for all her youth, had inherited something I'd nearly forgotten I had to pass down. Not just money, but backbone. I once read that strength isn't loud, it's quiet, rooted, slow to bend. That week, mine sounded like teacups returned gently to their saucers, like a phone left ringing, like paper sliding into a file folder, one document at a time. No shouting, no retaliation, just silence. Heavy, deliberate. But not everyone appreciated that kind of silence. 2 days after Evelyn's visit, I received a message from a man named Peter Lang, a financial advisor. Apparently, Thomas and Evelyn's. He left a voicemail using the kind of voice that sounded freshly printed. Mrs. Groves, I represent certain interests of your son and his wife. I'm reaching out to request clarification regarding recent asset transfers. We believe some of these may have occurred under emotional pressure, and there's concern about your capacity to manage such significant decisions. If you're willing, we'd like to assist in rebalancing your estate in a way that protects your legacy and family unity. Family unity. That was a new flavor of manipulation. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Deborah. She responded within the hour. Don't worry, they're fishing, but I'll send them a formal cease contact. It's time to put them on record. Good. Let them talk to lawyers. Let them pay for every hour they try to twist truth into doubt. I'd spent enough years subsidizing their schemes. Now they could subsidize their own fantasies. Later that evening, I baked. Not for them, for me. Banana bread. With the recipe Ray's mother gave me when we were first married. Smudged in my handwriting, the ink fading where I'd once spilled vanilla. It had been years since I'd baked without an occasion. No birthday, no fundraiser, no obligation. Just because I wanted the house to smell warm again. Halfway through, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something told me it wasn't them. I opened the door and found Emma. She was holding a stack of papers, her shoulders hunched, eyes tired. Am I interrupting? Only the bread, I said. Come in. We sat in the kitchen, the oven humming behind us. She laid the papers on the table, printouts, statements, emails. I didn't read them. I just looked at her. I think they're digging, she said. Trying to find something on me. Evelyn asked if I'd used the trust funds yet. I haven't, not $1. But she said if I so much as spend it on rent, they'll accuse me of misusing assets. They don't have access, I said. They're trying, she whispered. They're making calls, asking questions at my work. My advisor said they even contacted the college bursar's office. They're hoping you'll break. Emma looked down. Part of me wants to, just to make it stop. No, I said. You don't give cowards what they want. She nodded slowly, but I saw the weight in her spine, the way her fingers picked at the corner of the paper. They don't see me as a person, she said. Just a chess piece. They don't see anyone as a person, I said. Just means to an end. I stood and poured us tea. She took hers with honey, always had. I remembered the first time I gave her a cup that way. She was 8, had a fever. I sat beside her all night, reading old storybooks until she finally fell asleep with her head on my lap. They'd forgotten that girl existed. I hadn't, and I never would. When the banana bread was done, we ate 2 slices each, warm, no plates, just napkins and hands. We didn't talk about money after that, or law, or tactics. We just talked about books, the one she was reading, the one I'd meant to, the ones Ray never returned to the library. When she left, she hugged me tightly, then whispered, "I'm proud of you." The words sank into me like water into dry earth. After she drove off, I stood in the doorway a long time, holding my shawl closed, watching the night. My son was somewhere out there, furious, entitled, plotting. But in here, there was only peace and banana bread. I thought they'd retreat, that after the lawyer's letter, after the silence, after the door Evelyn walked away from, they'd run out of steam, out of nerve. But people like them don't retreat. They change tactics. The next call didn't come to me. It went to the church. Pastor Helen phoned that afternoon, gentle as ever. She's been leading our small congregation for nearly 20 years, always with hands that smelled like lemon balm and a voice that could still the wildest child. "Edith," she said, "I got a visit from Thomas." Of course she did. "I told him we don't get involved in family disputes," she continued carefully. "But I thought you should know. He seemed concerned." I almost laughed. "Concerned about my soul?" "Concerned about your declining health," she said softly. "He wanted to know if I'd noticed any signs." There it was, the slow drip of poison. They couldn't get my money through banks or lawyers, so now they'd try through doubt, through reputation, through whispers in the corners of places I'd once been safe. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Pastor Helen paused. "Edith, I know you, and I know what strength looks like. If you need me to talk to anyone, the bishop, the board, I will." "No need," I said. "Let them wonder." Later that week, at the Wednesday potluck, I saw it. A few glances, quickly averted. 2 couples whispering at the coat rack. Mild, subtle things. But I know the shape of a story before it's told. Someone had started talking. I didn't flinch. I scooped mashed potatoes onto paper plates and asked Dottie Mae about her new hip like nothing had changed. Because nothing had. Let them think I'm fragile. Let them circle like well-dressed vultures. They'd find no feast here. That evening, after church, I got a text from Emma. "They're telling people you're unwell, that the trust was a mistake, that I coerced you." I replied simply, "I trust you. They don't matter." But I knew it mattered to her. Emma had always believed in fairness, that truth would win if you just said it loud enough. She didn't understand yet that some people hear only what benefits them. The next day, I decided to fight back. Not with letters, not with lawyers, not even with words. I called the local library. "Hi," I said. "I'd like to book the community room next Wednesday night for a reading." "A reading?" "Yes. A personal account, family, finances, boundaries, a public reflection?" The woman on the line hesitated. "Is this for a book club?" "No," I said. "It's for anyone who's ever been told they're too old to matter." She booked the room. I made 20 flyers on my home printer. Simple, black and white. Wednesday, 7 p.m., Edith Groves, a quiet retelling free, open to all. I left 5 at the coffee shop, 2 at the florist. I handed 1 to Pastor Helen. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked. I smiled. No vengeance, just truth. Because I wasn't going to whisper, not anymore. They'd tried to drown me in the quiet, to weaponize my age, my grief, my solitude. Let them come to that library next week. Let them sit in chairs and pretend not to squirm. I'd tell my story, and this time, they'd have to listen. The folding chairs were already half filled when I arrived. It surprised me. Not just the number of people, but the kinds. Women from church. A man from the hardware store I hadn't seen in a decade. 2 young girls I didn't recognize, holding notebooks in their laps. And in the back, near the exit, standing with arms folded and posture stiff, was Evelyn. Not Thomas. Of course not Thomas. He'd sent her like always. The mouthpiece, the shield, the mask. I walked to the front of the room with my notes in one hand and a thermos of tea in the other. I wasn't nervous. That feeling had passed long ago, somewhere between his first betrayal and my last forgiveness. This wasn't a performance. It was a declaration. Pastor Helen sat in the front row. Emma slipped in quietly and took the seat beside her. I caught her eye and nodded once. She didn't smile. She looked serious. Ready. Good. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing behind the small podium. No microphone, no amplification, just me. My name is Edith Groves. I've lived in this town since I was 21. I ran a hardware store with my husband, raised 1 son, paid my taxes, kept a clean kitchen, and buried more friends than I care to count. I paused. I am not sick. I am not senile. I am not fragile. But I am tired of silence, of manipulation, of the way people treat older women like faded photographs, easy to overlook unless you need something sentimental. A few nods. Someone sniffled in the second row. I came here tonight to tell you a story. My story. The one that's being twisted and whispered around this town in coffee shops and choir rows. I came to correct the record. I opened my notebook, but I didn't read from it. I spoke from memory, from the marrow. I told them about the forged document, about Thomas walking into a bank and trying to declare me incompetent, about the letter with Ray's dead name at the bottom, about the calls, the threats, the lawyer's slick suggestions that I had lost touch with reality. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just told the truth, line by line, like nails into wood. I told them about the trust, how I'd created it for Emma because she was the only one who came without asking, who stayed without strings. And then I looked directly at Evelyn. She told me I was tearing the family apart, I said. But what do you call a family that only holds together through fear and obligation? Is that even something worth saving? Evelyn didn't blink, but her fingers tightened on her purse. Good. I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking for applause. I just want the truth to live somewhere outside my body before it's too late. I took a breath. I know many of you have children, grandchildren. I know some of you have secrets, shame, maybe regret. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I've kept quiet for too long. I know the feeling. I looked around the room, at the woman from the corner store who once lent me sugar, at the man who ran the funeral parlor, at Emma, watching me like a lighthouse. Well, I said, this is me saying it's never too late. I stepped back. No bow, no flourish. Just the hush of a room learning how to listen again. Afterward, there was no clapping, just something better. Stillness. The kind that doesn't need noise to prove it heard you. Then, one by one, people rose. Some shook my hand, others hugged me. A few just nodded, eyes glassy, lips tight. I didn't need words. I had enough of those tonight. Emma came last. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around me like she was trying to hold everything together that the world had tried to tear apart. And then she whispered, "You looked taller tonight. I laughed. That's what happens when you stop carrying shame. Behind her, Evelyn had already gone, slipped out the side door like smoke, like guilt trying to avoid daylight. I didn't care. Let her run. Let her report back. Let them fume in their rooms filled with resentment and failed control. I had done what I came to do. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreaming of explanations. I woke to roses, 3 pale yellow stems in a mason jar left on my porch without a note. No card, no signature, just the flowers, placed gently beside the door like gratitude that didn't need to be traced. I knew they were from someone who had been there, someone who heard. Inside, the kettle hissed. I poured my tea, sat by the window, and watched the street breathe. A dog walker passed, a boy with a backpack too large for his frame. Life, unaware that anything had changed, but it had. Not in the headlines, not in legal documents. Inside. Later that morning, Emma called. "They're quiet," she said. "Too quiet." She meant Thomas and Evelyn. I understood the worry. That stillness wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The quiet of people who think long games, who don't mind waiting if they believe you'll wear down. But I wasn't tired. Not anymore. "They know now," I said. "All of them. The town, the church, your boss, the bank. That story they were trying to spin has a counterweight now." Emma sighed. "I'm still getting calls from a number that won't leave voicemails." "Block it." I did, but it feels like they're circling. Waiting for something. "They're waiting for you to break," I said. "So don't." There was a pause. They're not used to hearing no. They're about to get fluent in it. I hung up and got dressed slowly. I was heading into town. Not for errands, but for presents. It matters sometimes just to be seen. At the coffee shop, the owner, Miranda, gave me my tea on the house. She didn't say why, and I didn't ask. A silent solidarity passed between us. I sat by the window and read the paper, letting the normalcy settle into my bones. Then, Evelyn walked in. No clipboard this time. No coat armor. Just jeans, a sweater, and a face that looked carved out of cold marble. She saw me, paused, then walked straight to the counter, ordered her drink, waited, said nothing, but she kept glancing over. Flickers, tells. When she turned to leave, she paused at my table. "Quite the speech," she said. I didn't look up from my paper. "Truth doesn't need embellishment. You've turned this town into your jury." "No," I said, folding the paper carefully. "I just stopped letting you write the testimony." She shifted. "You think any of this will matter when the lawyers get involved?" "It already matters. People believe me. And more importantly, I do." She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle that used to be easy. "You always were theatrical." "No," I said. "I was quiet. You just mistook that for agreement." She scoffed, stepped back. But before she left, I added, "You can keep circling, keep calling, keep spinning stories. But I promise you, Evelyn, when the dust settles, all you'll have is the echo of your own entitlement." She didn't reply. She left. And this time the room didn't watch me. It watched her. Later, at home, I sat in the kitchen with the roses in front of me. I touched one of the petals. Soft, stubborn in its brightness. Then I opened the locked drawer where I kept my will. I added a note. Not legal, just personal. To Emma, in case you ever doubt your worth, know this. You didn't inherit money. You inherited proof that standing your ground is not the same as being unkind. Love, Grandma. I folded the note, placed it beneath the documents, and closed the drawer. Let the others prepare lawsuits, whispers, strategies. I had legacy, and not even they could steal that. It came quietly, the way most endings do. A letter, certified mail, return receipt requested. My name typed neatly, the envelope thick but weightless in meaning. The sender, Thomas Groves, C.O. Lang and Associates. Deborah called before I even opened it. "It's not a lawsuit," she said. "It's a settlement offer." Of course it was. They'd tested the town, tested me, tested Emma. Found no cracks. So now they'd do what all entitled people do when power slips through their fingers. Offer a compromise designed to look like mercy. I opened the letter with a butter knife, unfolded it on the kitchen table like a relic. To Edith Groves. In the interest of preserving what remains of our family's dignity and avoiding further public embarrassment, we propose the following. You agree to dissolve the trust in Emma's name and reinstate the previous financial distribution outlined in your 2019 estate plan. In exchange, we agree to cease all legal and reputational challenges and refrain from further action or contact. This is a one-time offer. Please consider the impact on your granddaughter and the long-term unity of our family. With respect, Thomas and Evelyn Groves. No lawyer's signature. Just theirs. Not legal strategy. Just desperation in a suit. I read it twice. Then once more, slower. Every sentence trying to fold itself into reason, into decency. But the lie was loud in every line. They weren't offering peace. They were offering silence. Mine. Emma came by that evening. I handed her the letter without comment. She read it, eyes scanning quickly, her face unreadable. When she finished, she looked up. "Are you going to answer?" "Yes," I said. "I already did." I showed her the envelope I'd prepared. My response. 2 lines, handwritten, no letterhead, no legal phrasing, no. My dignity was never yours to negotiate. Emma exhaled slowly, then smiled. A quiet, proud thing. "Can I mail it?" I nodded. She left 10 minutes later, envelope in hand, coat zipped tight against the wind. I stood at the window long after her car pulled away, let the stillness wrap around me like an old song, and I thought, not for the first time, about everything I'd lost in this fight. Not the money, not the years, but the illusion. The idea that love and loyalty always come as a matched set. That if you give enough, explain enough, wait long enough, people will become who you hoped they'd be. They don't. Sometimes they become louder versions of their worst selves. And sometimes the best thing you can do, the most loving thing, is not to chase, not to beg, not to teach, but to stop. To plant your feet in the truth and let others spin themselves dizzy. That night, I wrote one more letter. Not to Thomas. Not to Evelyn. To myself. Edith, you waited too long to believe you were right, but now you do. And that counts. Let the world call it stubbornness. You know it as survival. You know it as peace. Let that be enough. I placed the letter in the back of my notebook. Closed it gently. Then I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and slept. No dreams, no ghosts, no noise, just sleep. The sun rose through the lace curtains, soft and unhurried. October was waning, gold giving way to gray, the kind of air that smells like endings. I got up slow. No rush anymore. No phone to watch. No letter to expect. The mailbox had been empty for days. The silence now felt earned, like a room aired out after years of stale air. Emma came by with cinnamon rolls, still warm in the box. We sat at the kitchen table, just like we used to, the radio murmuring old songs we both pretended not to know the words to. "They're gone quiet," she said between bites. They will stay that way, I answered. She nodded. Dad unfriended me, deleted old photos too. I shrugged. Let him delete. We still have memory. She smiled, but it was tired. Not a girl's smile. A woman's. The kind that's learned some people don't come back, and that's not always a tragedy. I looked at her then. Really looked. She didn't just carry my blood. She carried my lesson. She didn't ask for power. She didn't demand inheritance. But when offered the chance to step forward, to take the truth and hold it steady, she did. Without shaking. Without apologizing. That's legacy. Not property. Not assets. Not names on deeds, but courage. Before she left, she asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about that for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said, "but I regret waiting so long to stop excusing it." Emma leaned over and kissed the top of my head. "I love you," she said. "I know," I replied. She walked out into the morning, cinnamon still in the air. I watched her drive away and felt something shift. Not an ending, but a settlement. Like dust, finally choosing the ground. That afternoon, I wrote one final thing. Just a short line on the back page of my notebook. Let the silence you chose be the peace they never gave you. I closed the notebook and slid it into the top drawer with the rest. The will, the trust, the documents they once tried to take from me. All still here, all still mine. I stood and made a cup of tea, sat by the window. The maple tree in the yard had shed most of its leaves. There were only a few clinging on. But the ones left? They held on like they meant it, just like me. And if you've made it this far, reading, listening, nodding along with the parts that hurt, then maybe this story was meant for you too. Maybe you needed someone to say it first. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness if it comes chained to fear. And most of all, you're not too old, too small, too late to protect what's yours. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment, share it, or send it to someone who needs to hear it. Not because I need the attention, but because someone else might still be waiting to speak. Let this be their sign.